Hi everyone. I'm sorry I have to be out of class again. I know it's not ideal and it's not by my choice, but since I have to be out, I'm making a video to pick up where we left with the notes yesterday and finish what we would have gone over in class today so that we keep pace with the schedule. So we're just going to pick up on page 3 where we left off yesterday. Again, we were working with these lines that are cut by a transversal and identifying the angle pairs that are formed by the two lines in the transversal. So the first new pair we need to talk about are the alternate interior angles. Okay, so alternate interior angles are non-adjacent angles. So non-adjacent angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal between the lines. So I'm opposite sides of the transversal, I'm in between the lines. So I know this is a tight squeeze here, but I'm going to draw this picture in again. So there's my two lines. Again, the transversal is just the line that intersects those two lines. And so I've got my 8 angles that are formed, 7 and 8. So now we said that these pairs are in between the lines, so I'm only going to focus on the area in pink here. So I know I'm only working with 3, 4, 5, and 6. We also said that they lie on opposite sides of the transversal. So for alternate interior, I'm going to have 2 pairs. I have angle 4 and angle 6, and I'm going to have angle 3 and angle 5. So they're on the interior, or they're inside the lines, and alternate just means they're opposite sides of the transversal. So we have 2 of those pairs. Okay, next we have our alternate exterior angles. Okay, these are angles that lie on opposite sides of the transversal. But now these are outside the lines. So here's my setup again. The transversal is in blue. So now I'm only focusing for my alternate exterior on angles that are outside of those 2 lines. So now I'm looking in this new area formed by the pink. So now I'm down to angles 1, 2, 7, and 8. So now I'm looking for angles that are opposite sides of the transversal. So I'm looking at pair angle 1 and angle 7, and angle 2 and angle 8 for my alternate exterior. Okay, so our next pair is same side interior angles. Okay, and these are angles that lie on the same side of the transversal, and they're between the lines. Move this up a little bit. Okay, so again, for same side interior, that interior tells us they're between or inside my pair of lines. So I'm looking in the middle here. But unlike our alternate interior, these are on the same side. So I'm looking in the pink, and I'm picking a pair that are on the same side of the transversal. So we have angle 3 and angle 6, and angle 4 and angle 5. Okay, and the last pair was already filled in for you because your textbook, for some reason, doesn't include it in the vocabulary. But we'll also be talking about same side exterior angles, which again lie on the same side of that transversal, but now we're looking outside of our lines. So I'm outside of my 2 lines. I'm in this pink region. And now I'm picking angles that are on the same side but outside the lines. So angle 2 and angle 7, and angle 1 and angle 8. So that's all the vocabulary we need. So now we're just going to practice first identifying our parallel, perpendicular, and skew lines, and then looking at two lines and a transversal and trying to identify these angle pairs. So I'm going to jump ahead. We'll go back and discuss the image on page 4 when I'm back in class, but let's go ahead and take a look at some examples. Okay, so our first examples go with that first target of identifying parallel lines, perpendicular lines, skew lines, and parallel planes. So my first question asks me to identify segments that are parallel to AB. So I'm just going to highlight that here. Again, it's asking us for segments, so that's why we're using our segment notation here. So looking at this picture, we know that parallel segments are coplanar segments. So if I consider the top of this box, I can see that AB is going to be parallel to segment DC. And just so we keep revisiting this notation, I say segment AB is parallel to segment CD. However, I can also consider the back of this box, and I can see that AB would also be parallel to segment EF. So there are two parallel segments in my figure. Okay, the next one is a little trickier. Here's our skew segments. And again, we said skew segments are not in the same plane and they don't intersect. So EF is down here. So I have to be careful to pick a pick a segment that's in a plane that is not the back of my box, and it cannot also be the bottom. And remember in class we talked about picking a segment that goes in a different direction. So I can look here and I can look at segment DH. And it's pretty easy to tell, since this is running along the back and this is running in the opposite direction along the front of my box, that those two segments are going to be skew. Now we don't have a symbol here, so we can just say segment DH is skew to segment EF. There are other choices as well. For example, I could pick segment, let me get a different color, BC here is another segment that would be skew to EF. Those segments are non-coplanar and they're not going to intersect. Okay, next we're talking about perpendicular. So I want the segments that are perpendicular to FG. So they have to intersect at a right angle. So if we're assuming this is a cube, we know we have a lot of right angles here. So I know that any of these segments running up and down, those are like maybe what meets at the corners of our room. Those are going to be perpendicular. So I know that segment BF is perpendicular to FG. Again, using my symbol for perpendicular. I could use segment CG would also be perpendicular to FG. And I could also consider where these meet at the floor. So segment EF would also be perpendicular to FG. So you can see a lot of times we have a number of different options for picking these segments. Okay, the last one, the only difference here is now instead of picking out a parallel segment, we're looking for a parallel plane. So the first thing I'm going to identify is where this plane BCGF is. And if I follow this, I could tell this plane is right here. So in my diagram, there's only one plane that will never intersect, and that would be my other wall of my box here. Again, to name a plane, we just need to use at least 3 letters. We could use 4. So I'm going to call this plane DAEH. And again, as long as you use at least 3 of those letters, that would be an appropriate name for that plane. So that's all to do with our first target, just identifying parallel, skew, and perpendicular segments and planes. So now we're going to move on and look at these angle pairs and see if we can identify them. And so something that may be helpful is I'm going to first kind of shade my areas here. So I know that all of these pairs in purple, these are my interior, where my interior angles are going to be, right? Those are between my 2 lines. On the other hand, out here are where all my exterior angle pairs will be, because those are outside of my 2 lines. So now, if I'm looking for alternate interior, I know my interior is going to be in the purple area here. Alternate just tells me that they're opposite sides of the transversal. So I'm going to say opposite sides of transversal. Right? And I'm going to label this. This line here is our transversal because it intersects those other 2 lines. So now, if I'm on the inside and I need alternate interior, if I start with angle 3, I know its partner on the opposite side of the transversal is angle 6. Likewise, if I pick angle 4, its partner is going to be angle 5. In number 6, I'm asking for alternate exterior. So we know we still have that relationship of being outside, or excuse me, on opposite sides of the transversal, but now we're outside of the 2 lines, so we're in the pink region. So for these angles, I could grab angle 1 and angle 8, and 2 and angle 7. For number 7, we have same side interiors. Again, we're in the interior, so we're in the purple area here. And now we know that we're on the same side of the transversal. So I'm going to have 2 angle pairs here. Angle 3 and 5 will be one of my pairs. And angle 4 and angle 6. For same side exteriors, again, I'm in the pink area, same side of the transversal, so we get angle 1 and angle 7, and angle 2 and angle 8. Now, correspondings function a little bit differently, and we actually have 4 pairs of these types of angles. Remember, we said correspondings sit on the same side of the transversal and on the same side of the line. So for example, if I pick angle 2, I notice that angle 2 is to the right of the transversal and above this line. So its corresponding angle is going to be angle 6, because it is also to the right of the transversal and above the line. So if angle 2 and angle 6 are a pair of corresponding angles, we know that angle 4 and angle 8 are as well. And on the opposite side of the transversal, to the left of the transversal and above the line, to the left of the transversal and above the line, we get angle 1 and angle 5, and then angle 3 and angle 7. And so this is about the most straightforward type of problem that you'll see, where it's just 2 lines and 1 transversal, and you're trying to identify those pairs. So on the next page, we have examples that are slightly more complex. Because now you'll notice, if we take a look at number 10, now I have 3 lines that are intersecting. And so it's not as clear to us which line is the transversal. So here's how I approach these problems. We know we have to identify first the transversal, and then we can identify which kind of angle pair we have. So in number 10, it asks us to look at angle 1 and angle 4. So the first thing I do is I cover up any part of the diagram that doesn't have to do with those angles. So if I'm looking just at angle 1 and angle 4, I can cover up this part of the diagram. And then it's clear to see that here are my 2 lines, and that line L here is my transversal because it intersects those 2 lines. So for my transversal, I'm going to put line L. And now I can see angle 1 and angle 4 are on the exterior of those 2 lines, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So I know those angle pairs are alternate exterior. So by blocking those out, it kind of takes out less of that picture and there's less distraction. So I'm going to use that same technique as we go through the rest of these examples. So now for problem 11, I'm looking at angle 8 and 12. So again, I'm going to figure out, here's 8 and 12 down here, so I can tell right away that I don't need the rest of that picture. So now 8 and 12, I notice that they're on the same side of the transversal, and they're both to the left of those lines. So again, here's my transversal in blue. And then I have that intersecting the 2 lines. So 8 and 12 are both kind of below the transversal and both to the left of the lines. So they're kind of in the same location. So those would be examples of our corresponding angles. Again, our transversal that we highlighted in blue here is line W. Okay, so we'll do 2 more quick examples, and then you'll have time to practice this and work with one another to complete that practice. Okay, again, same idea. I'm going to first locate angle 4 and angle 10, and I'm going to block off the rest of that picture. So here's my 2 lines. Here's my transversal that intersects both of those lines. And now 4 and 10, we can see those are both in between those 2 lines. So we know they're an interior pair, and they're on opposite sides of that transversal. So our transversal here is line N, and our angle pair, again, they're on opposite sides of the transversal, which makes them alternate, and they're in between the lines, which makes them interior. Okay, so for our last example, now we're looking for angle 2 and angle 12, which I see right here. So I have 2 lines being intersected by this transversal. It looks like my angle pair 2 and 12, they're both outside the 2 lines. So I know they're an exterior pair. And they both lie to the right of that transversal, so they're same side. So here we have same side exterior angles, and our transversal is line H. So now what I'd like you to do is work on the practice that I will check in tomorrow. So I want you to work on our 3.1 practice on page 7 in your packet. It's just that one page. Do the best that you can and feel free to work with a partner and check your answers with a partner. We'll check that in tomorrow, and then we'll be doing additional practice with this tomorrow in class. Good luck!